All right, good evening. Here we are. It's 8:40. Tonight we're learning Maseches Rosh Hashana, Daf Yomi. Housekeeping notes, 2 of them for the coming week, just so that we're all on the same page. This coming week on Monday morning, we'll be having Daf Yomi. This coming week on Wednesday, so a week from tonight, Wednesday will be the blot and a half night. Thursday morning will be one blot and nothing Thursday night. I'll be out of town. My Rabbi Hauer's child is getting married, so I'll be at a wedding at that time. So I'll send updates as they come along. We're just starting to prime the brains, a little bit of a slightly different schedule for next week. That's fine. We'll miss you. We're starting on Yud Aleph Amud Aleph, about 10 lines down. And we're starting at the words Tanya, Rabbi Eliezer, Omer. And if you recall from the end of shiur yesterday at the bottom of Yud Aleph Amud Beis, we had seen a machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yehoshua in regards to whether or not the world was created in Tishrei or Nisan, the shitas respectively quoted in order, Rabbi Eliezer followed by Rabbi Yehoshua. So today what we're going to do is analyze every part of that brisa. That brisa spoke about when the world was created, the birth and death months of the Avos, the fact that Yitzchak was born on Pesach, the fact that on Rosh Hashana, that Sarah, Rachel, and Chana were granted the privilege of having children, and that on Rosh Hashana, Yosef left prison, and that on Rosh Hashana, the Jews stopped doing slave labor in Mitzrayim, and the famous line of Benisan Nigalu, Benisan Esidin Ligal, that's a machlokes. Is it that Mashiach is going to come, please God, very soon? Is he going to come in Nisan or Tishrei? That's a discussion as well. So let's start with this brisa, which we'll pick up right where we left off in the midst of this machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yehoshua, 10 lines down, Rosh Hashana Yud Aleph Amud Aleph, Tanya. The brisa writes, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Minayin shebetishrei nibra ha'olam. How does he know that the world was created in Tishrei? Says the Gemara from the following pasuk, Shene'emar. This is this pasuk and the one we're going to see next are very similar, so we have to pay attention to the differences between them. Vayomer Elokim tadshei haaretz deshe, Esev mazriya zera eitz peri. It says that there's going to be tadshei haaretz deshe. There's going to be the ground will be pushing vegetation out, and it will be eitz peri. It will be a tree that already has fruit. We would not have necessarily read it this way. We would have called it a fruit tree. But here, as you can see from the Gemara's framing of the pasuk, we understand that it means that it is full with fruit. Ezehu chodesh, what month is it? She'haaretz motzia d'shayim v'ilan malei peiros, where the ground is growing vegetation, but the trees are already full with fruit. Have Omer zet Tishrei, that's toward the end of the summer when the crop is full, when the trees are pretty robust with their fruits. Also, haperek zman revia haisa, at this time in Gan Eden, that was a time of revia, it was a time of rain. V'yardu geshamim, the rains had come down with simchu, and things had grown already. Shene'emar, as the pasuk in Chumash says, ve'ed ya'aleh min haaretz, that there was moisture that came up from the ground. So therefore, all of this aligns beautifully with for Rabbi Eliezer's shita to say that the world was created in Tishrei. All is well. 12, 15 lines down or so, Rabbi Yehoshua disagrees. Rabbi Yehoshua Omer minayin shebenisan nivra ha'olam. How do we know that in Nisan the world was created? Shene'emar, and this pasuk is quite similar. They're not even that far apart from one another in Chumash. One of the psukim is in Breshis Beis Vav, and the second one is in Breshis Aleph Yud Beis. They're not that far apart. And here is what the second pasuk says: Vatotzei haaretz deshe, esev mazriya zera ve'etz oseh peri, a tree that makes fruit, implying that the tree is not yet laden with fruit. Ezu chodesh, what month is it? She'haaretz malei d'shayim, where the ground is full with vegetation. Ve'ilan motzi peiros, and a tree is about to bear fruits. Have Omer zenisan, it's on the earlier part of the spring. It's in Nisan, right after Pesach. So therefore, it's not yet full with fruits. Also, a parak at that same time, concurrently, what was happening is man behima v'chaya. The ov shemizdavgin zeitzal. That was also mating season for the animals. Shene'emar lav shukar matzon. If you'll recall, we analyzed this pasuk in 2 different ways, according to 2 different tanaim, about the fact that animals were mating and conceiving during that time. Now, this was the sheet of Rabbi Eliezer, who has the pasuk in Perek Beis, and as well the sheet of Rabbi Yehoshua, who has the pasuk in Perek Aleph. What do each of the tanaim do with the other person's pasuk? Says the Gemara, v'idach nami, 1/3 of the way down, halfway through the thinner width lines. What does the first sheet of Rabbi Eliezer do with the fact that the pasuk in Perek Aleph says that it's oseh peri, it makes fruits, but it's not yet a tree that's laden with fruit? He says, no, that that doesn't indicate that the tree is empty. Hahu, that pasuk, when it says it's Ose Peri, is lebracha ledoros u'dichsiv. It's a bracha for the future that Kadosh Baruch Hu will make trees that they'll always bear fruit. V'idach nami, what does Rabbi Yehoshua do with the pasuk that Rabbi Eliezer quoted? The Amar Rabbi Yehoshua skipped a line. V'idach nami haksiv eitz pri. According to the first pasuk that was brought to support the shita of Rabbi Eliezer, that the world was created taka in Tishrei. So what does he do with the fact that it says that it's full with fruits? So it says the Gemara, Hahu kid Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. That pasuk can be understood through the lens of Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. The Amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, Kol Ma'aseh Bereshis lekomasa nivro. In the Ma'aseh Bereshis, trees were not grown as saplings; they were grown at full growth, lekomasan, at their height. L'daitan nivru. They were spoken to. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, again, we don't know what this means. HaKadosh Baruch Hu speaks. Is this a mashal? Did it really happen? The famous machlokas between the Ramban and the Rambam, the Garze Evim Keves. Well, we have these supernatural occurrences in the world where sheep and wolves can live amongst one another. Did God speak to the trees? Do we know what that means? Even if the answer is yes, these are hard topics to understand. And as well, Litzivyonan Nivrau, Litzivyonan means, as Rashi explains, that they kind of got to choose, as Rashi says, a third of the way down, Dibur Hamaskal B'Tzivyonam B'Tam Echad Be'echad U'B'Tfus Kol Echad. They could choose what they wanted to look like. I want my bark to look like this. I want my fruits to look like that. They got to have a conversation about it. Okay, again, we don't know what these mean. We say this pasuk all the time, at least twice a week. Al tikri tziva'am ella tzivyonam. And the drasha that we make is that they were spoken to choose how they wanted to look when a Kadosh Baruch Hu would create them. So therefore, that extra pasuk of Eitz Pri has a commentary to be explained like Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. And therefore, as we pause right here before we move on, we see that Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yehoshua both have psukim that support their shitas, that Rabbi Eliezer holds that the world was created in Tishrei and Rabbi Yehoshua holds that it was created in Nisan, and the psukim that are as kashas on their opponents are not problematic. Says the Gemara halfway down on Yud Aleph Amud Aleph, Rabbi Eliezer Omer Minayin Shebetishrei Noldu Avos. How do we know that the Avos were born in Tishrei? Because the pasuk says, "Shene'emar vayikohalu el hamelach shalomo kol ish Yisrael b'yerach ha'esanim bechag." Yerach, the month of the Esanim bechag with the holiday. Yerach shenoldu bo esane olam. It's a month in which the esane olam, the strong ones of the world, were born. A reference to the Avos. How do we know that that's the case? My mashma dahai etan lishna de tkifehu. How do we know that the word etan is a reference to tkife, to the strong ones? In fact, we know this when people are at brisses and they name their kid Etan. They always reference that Avram Avinu was Isha Isanim. That's a common reference. So people talk about this Gemara. They don't know they're talking about a Gemara, but that's what the Gemara says, that it refers to someone strong. How do we know that? So the answer of the Gemara is a conglomerate of psukim. Says the Gemara, Kedichsiv, as the pasuk writes, Eitan Moshavecha, that's one, Eitan, the Eitan of your Moshav, the Omer. And the second pasuk, which helps to bolster where we're going, the direction that we're going, Shimu Harim, Es Riv Hashem, listen, mountains, those who are fighting for Hashem, V'ha Esanim, Mostei Aretz, the Esanim that are the foundations of the world, Ve'omer, and now here's the describing factor of the Esanim, Ve'omer Kol Dodi Hinezeba, the voice of Hashem, here it is, Medaleg al Heharim, it skips over the mountains, Mekapetz al Hagevaotz, and it jumps over the hills. Midaleg al Heharim bischus avos. So it's the avos who can go over the mountains, which connects with the previous pasuk about the har and the esanim, and the kapetz al hagvos that it will go over the hills. That's bischus imaho. So we can see here with all the psukim put together that the word etan is a reference to those that are strong, and therefore the assumption is that it was in a month of the Chag of Sukkot. That's going to be in the month of Tishrei, and it was Yerach Esanim of the strong ones, and therefore we know that the Avos were born in that month. Rabbi Yoshua Omer, he says 3 lines before the wide lines, 2/3 of the way down. He argues, how does he know that really our forefathers were born in the month of Nisan? Shenemar, the pasuk says, that 480 years after the Jews left in the month of Ziv, it was in the month when the bright ones of the world, Ziv, right? Ziv Hashchina, the bright, the light, that the bright ones were born, and we are talking about in this pasuk Yitzias Mitzrayim, which took place in the month of Nisan. So very clearly, if you are referencing the avos as the bright ones, as the zivsane ha'olam, so then of course it would make sense to then assume that they were born in that month. What does each shita do with their counterparts question? First long line, end of the line, Be'idach nami, haksiv b'yarach ha'isan. And what does Rabbi Yeshua do with the pasuk that Rabbi Eliezer used to say that really Tishrei was the month? So says the Gemara, Hasan kife b'mitzvos. You're right that Eitan means takif, that Eitan means very strong. But what we're saying is that the month of Tishrei is chock full of mitzvos. There's so many things going on. You've got Rosh Hashana, which has shofar. You've got Yom Kippur, which has all of the mitzvos hayom of Inui, and you have the mitzvah of tshuva, and you have Sukkot, which has a sukkah, and it has lulav and esrog, and all of the arba minim, v'chule, v'chule, v'chule. So therefore, that when the pasuk does speak about Yarach HaYisanim, you're correct that it's a reference to the strong ones, but not people. It's a reference to the fact that the month is laden with mitzvos. V'idach nami, what does Rabbi Eliezer do with the fact Haksiv b'chodesh ziv, that the bright ones? How does he explain that pasuk? So says the Gemara, no problem. Hahu di'isbe ziva li'ilani, that there's a brightness to the trees, and this is quoted in Shulchan Aruch Damar of Yehuda. Haiman de nofak b'yom de Nisan, a person who goes out in the month of Nisan, v'chaze ilane de melav leve, and he sees that there are trees that are in bloom. Omer, he should make a bracha. Baruch shelo chiser me'olam klum, uvara bo b'rios tovos v'ilanos tovos li'isnos bohen b'nei adam, and that is the bracha that one should make. This is birkas ha'ilanos that we make, and as you can see from the line here in the Gemara, in the name of Rabbi Yehuda, Haiman de nafak b'yomi Nisan, that we're supposed to only make this bracha in the month of Nisan. So that's the earliest end. So there's a couple of factors that have to take place. You have to be in the month of Nisan, and you have to see that it's malav leve. You have to see that it's blooming. So therefore, when the pasuk was referring to ziva, b'chodesh ziv, so Rabbi Eliezer would say back to Rabbi Yeshua, you read the pasuk wrong. It wasn't talking about the bright ones referring to the avos. It was saying that the trees are beautiful, and you should make a bracha on them. It's not to say that he disagrees with the shita of Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Yeshua probably agrees to the fact that we make this bracha, but he might have learned it from somewhere else. Here we are, 3/4 of the way down, about 20 lines from the bottom. The Gemara says that even though there is a machlokas about when the avos were born, there is no machlokas that whatever month they held in which they were born was also the month that they died. And this is where, in the Gemara, where we come up with this idea that a tzaddik will die in the month in which he was born, if in fact he's a tzaddik. It says the Gemara, Man de Amar b'Nisan noldu b'Nisan mesu. According to Rabbi Yoshua, who says that the avos were born in Nisan, he'll definitely be of the opinion that they died in Nisan, and as well, Man de Amar b'Tishrei noldu b'Tishrei mesu. Shnei Amar, how do we know this principle? Vayomer aleihem ben mea ve'esrim shana anochi hayom. This is what Moshe says to the Jews, and he says to them, I am 120 days, and adds in an unnecessary word of today. He's talking when they thought his birthday was 6 months ago. No, he's saying today, I'm 120 years old. What's with the word hayom? Shein Talmud lomar bayom. The pasuk really didn't need to add the word hayom. Uma Talmud lomar hayom. Hayom malu yom hayishnosai. This is my days have been filled. L'lamecha she'Hakadosh Baruch Hu yoshev u'memale shenosem shel tzadikim. That Hakadosh Baruch Hu looks at the days and fills the days of the righteous. Miyom liyom mechodesh lechodesh shenemar es mispar yamecha amalei. I will fill all of your days. In other words, your year will be full. Namely, you will die in the month in which you, the tzaddik, will die in the month in which you were born. Very good. Says the Gemara, let's move on. How do we know? And the Bryce says that Yitzchak was born on Pesach. Remember, the Malachim came to visit, and they said, Lamoed ashuv elecha ko'es says, what's the rest of the pasuk? Well, later tomorrow morning. Hirsch texted me earlier today. He's like, how amazing is it? Not only is it this week's Parsha, but it's this day's Aliyah. It's Revi. No, it's not tomorrow morning, is it? It's in Rishon? Oh, I thought he texted me some mamish bucky. He goes, Hirsch, I have to look back at his text message. Anyways, it is very cool that it's mamish on this week. So then the pasuk says that the Malachim said, when I come back at the next Moed, what's a Moed? It's one of our holidays. So it says the Gemara, hang on one second. When were the malachim there? If you're going to say that they were there on Pesach, so how many days are there from Pesach to the next holiday? That 50 days later they came back. That there's no human gestation like that. No, that's ridiculous. You're not even 2 months pregnant at that point. Of course, the baby's not developed. Ella, the other option is the maybe the malachim were there on Shavuos, and what they were intending when they said moed, that they'll be back, that they'd be back the next moed, they were talking about Tishrei, but that doesn't work either because Shavuos is in Sivan and Tishrei is not that far away. It's only 5 months. Can't have a healthy baby born at that time. I just had a great shiur come in this week. A baby was born. It's a shiur, yeah. Can't even remember all the details. The baby was born 5.5 weeks early. There's nothing medically wrong with the baby. Like in diagnostics, the baby's fine. The baby is less than 4 pounds, 3 pounds in the high 3 pounds. He's being fed because he's having a hard time like suckling, like learning how to eat. So the halacha is that if a baby is chola, you have to push off the bris for 7 units of 20. How do we define illness? So when the person called me, I said, I have no idea. I'll call Rabbi first and I'll let you know. I have no idea what the answer is. And even if it's true, so what happens is, will they let me in to do the bris bedside in the NICU? Probably not. I'm not a physician. So then they don't live here. They live in Detroit. We got to figure out all the logistics, but then how long are you allowed to push off the bris? We have to get the determination that the baby's healthy. So these shilas do come up, but this baby is very, very early. That's not possible. Ella says the Gemara, it must be 10 lines from the bottom. What we're talking about is that the malachim came on Sukkot. Remember where we started. When was Yitzchak born? He was born on Nisan. The reason we know that is because there's no gestational period that matches from Chag to Chag unless you start at Sukkot and end at Pesach. Says the Gemara, wait. That's not true. Akati b'shisa yarche mikayalda. That's only 6 months. To go from Tishrei to, that's the Gemara is going to say that in a moment. The Gemara is going to share that idea. But the initial question of the Gemara is that in a regular year, in a non-Iber year, what do you have? You go from, let's say, the 15th of Tishrei to the 15th of Nisan. That's only 6 months. So the Gemara is bothered by it. It just says the Gemara, just like Michael shared, Tana, Osa Shana Mi'u Berasaisa, which brings us not to 6 months, but to 7 months. Says the Gemara, Sof, Ki midle mar yome tuma, batzrei lehu. We know, based on our Mara Mekomos, that she was Poreses Nida at that time, and they could not be together. She didn't conceive right away, which means that if there was a full exact 7 months, that's what we're going to have this year, between Sukkot, the 15th of Sukkot, and the 15th of Nisan, there will be exactly 7 months. But if Sarah was Poreses Nida, so then they couldn't be together, which means that there was at least a week. And that's if we follow the Dine D'Oraisa. Did they follow? I don't know. I don't know how they kept Hilchos Nida. Probably, I don't know what they did. I have no idea. It could be that they kept 12 days, but either way, it's going to be less than 7 months. According to this math, and let's just go with the basics of the Psukim in Vayikra, that Isha benidas tumasel dositma, that it's 1 full week. So then, yes, there's 7 months on the calendar from the 15th of Tishrei to the 15th of Nisan. But if there's 7 months with the Iber year, but she was Poreses Nida, then that means that she only conceived on, let's call it day 8, which means gestation was only 6 months and 3 weeks, which is not 7 months. So says the Gemara, Amar Mar Zutra, Afilu Lemanda Amar Yoledis Latisha Einu Yoledis in the Kutayin. This is a discussion we're not going to get into in detail now. But even according to those, we'll learn this in Maseches Yevamos in more color, that if, according to the one who says that once a baby is in the 9th month, then they're not Yoledis in the Kutayin, they don't have the baby early within the month. We assume it's only full. That person still holds Yoledis L'Shiva Yoledis in the Kutayin, that once a person reaches into the 7th month, they can only go partially into the 7th month. Shene'emar, as the pasuk writes, Vahilit kufos hayomim. Look at the words. Kufos are seasons. How many of them are there? 2. Miut kufos shtaim. Kufos at a minimum is 2, and there's 2 seasons. There's 4 seasons in the year, so 2 of them have to be 6 months. Miut yomim shnaim, and yomim is plural, so 6 months and 2 days is the minimum gestation period, because the 2 days into month 6 is really month 7, because when we start with our first month, you're starting 2 days in. That's month 0, day 2. So that means 6 months and 2 days. It's like when we count into the 6th hour, it's 5 hours and a minute. So here we're saying we're going to be 7 months of gestation. It's 6 months and a minute, 6 months and 2 days. So that works out. And therefore, we conclude from the Gemara that we assume, therefore, that the baby Yitzchak was born on Pesach. That means that the year prior in Sukkot, not the year prior, the earlier part of that year when she conceived mamish right at the end of Sukkot. The baby was born 6 months and 2 days later.
Why is it look like he was born on the first day of Pesach? Let it be Shvish of Pesach. It's still called a Chag, and you filled in your week.
It could be. The truth is, we don't know. All we know is that it was at a maximum, the gestation period was 6 months and 3 weeks. At a minimum, the gestation period was 6 months and 2 days. So somewhere in that 3 week range is when he was born. And it's under the assumption, which I might be wrong about, that the way they kept Hilchos Nida was like by Dine D'Oraisa, which is a reasonable assumption, but I don't have any Makomos to support that one way or the other. But the math would still work even if they kept 12 days as a minimum, like we keep as a minimum, 5 for Poresis Nida and 7 Shevan Akim to reflect our concerns for Zava Gedola. There's still enough time. It's still in the range of 6 months and 2 days and 6 months and 23 days. So it all fits. So then says the Gemara, 5 lines from the bottom, but Rosh Hashana, we said, according to both Tanaim, Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Yoshua, we had said the Nifkada, Rosh Hashana Nifkada, Sarah, Rachel, V'chana, Minalam. How do we know that on Rosh Hashana that these three women, these 3 barren women, were promised the gift or given the gift of having children? Amar Rabbi Lazar, Asya, it should be Zechira, and Asya Pekida. The reason it switched is because when the Gemara actually shows us what the Gzeira Shavas are, they're in the other order. So that's what some of the Kisvei Yad have. What were the different Gzeira Shavas? So the first was as follows: Ksiv berachel vayiskor Elokim es Rachel, uksiv bechana vayiskereh Hashem. So that's number 1. And va'asya zechira me Rosh Hashana, and that connects to Rosh Hashana. Dechsiv Shabbason zikaron teruah. And Pekida, how do we know about the conception? So it says the Gemara, Ksiv bechana ki pakad Hashem eschana, uksiv besara Hashem pakad Sarah. Therefore, we know that all of these women we link them all together with Gzeira Shava, and it's looped in to Rosh Hashana, and all is well. Rosh Hashana Yatsa Yosef Mibesa Asur Minalan. How do we know? 2 lines, and now on the last line of Daf Yud Aleph from an Aleph, how do we know that Yosef exited the Beis Asur in the prison that he was put in by Paro on that day, on Rosh Hashana? Dichsiv. That's the pasuk that we know. What does this have to do with anything? So says the Gemara as we turn to the top of Yud Aleph from an Aleph, and I'll just add, let me finish this first. This is all the same parak. It's all the same parak of Tehillim. And what does it say? That Yosef was B'tseisa when he left. So because the pasuk says at the bottom that we're talking about Chodesh Shofar, and the next couple of psukim indicate that he was B'tseisa, that Yosef left, therefore we know that he left. The commentary that we see at the top of this page is subject to some debate. We don't really know who wrote it. It's very strange. There's a few of them in the Masechta. I think there's 3. We know it's not Rashi. Look at the first 2 words. Kidipiresh Rashi. We know that's not the case. So you can always rule out an approximate timing. We know it was written after the 1100s. We don't know much more. So if anybody wants to do a little bit of research, feel free. But it seems to be that the Shita that he's quoting here is Rashi more than anyone. He quotes him at the beginning. He quotes it at the end. And I don't know who authored it. I'm on a chat for rabbis across the country. This was a bit of a discussion who authored this, and somebody put up some Mari Makomo. So it's interesting because we need to have the academic integrity of knowing who wrote what we're reading. So sometimes we're not sure that it's Rashi. Sometimes it might be his grandkid. We know in Baba Basra, that Rashi dies in Baba Basra while he was writing on Daf Chavtes. He died and the Rashbam took over. That's why Baba Basra is the largest Masechta. It's great for Daf Yomi. It's geschmack for Daf Yomi. But if you're learning every Rashbam, buckle up. It's a long ride. I'm excited for Baba Basra. Anyways, that's how the Gemara concludes that Yosef was let out of the Beis HaAsurim at that time. On the top of Yud Aleph from Beis Rosh Hashana Batla Avoda Me'avosenu b'Mitzrayim, that on Rosh Hashana the Jews stopped their avoda, their subjugation, while they were in Mitzrayim. How do we know? That the Jews stopped in Mitzrayim and they removed the sevel, the suffering from Shichmo, from their shoulders. Now, we saw that there was a machlokas between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua in regards to the to when the future Geula, Nirtz Hashem Mikarav, when that will take place. However, everyone agreed that B'Nisan Nigalu, how do we know? Kidi Isa, go look in Chumash. That's Mefurish. We know exactly what happened. B'Tishrei Asidin Ligoel. According to Rabbi Eliezer, how does he know? From where does he get this shita that we're going to be redeemed in the month of Tishrei? Asya Shofar. There's two psukim in shofar, and one of them is the one that we know. Ksiv hachak tiku b'chodesh shofar, and a pasuk that references the geulo. Ksiv hasam bayom ahu yitaka b'shofar gadol. So we see that there's a gzeir shava shofar. Rabbi Yoshua Amar B'Nisan Niglu B'Nisan Asidin Ligal Minalan. How does he know, or why does he assume that the geula will take place in the month of Nisan? So says the Gemara Amar Korah Leil Shimurim in Nisan by the psukim in Chumash by Nisan. The pasuk in Chumash says Leil Shimurim. This is why on that night. For those who are makbid, and what we should be, for those who are makbid, I'm not very good at it, just to be transparent. But for those who are makbid to stay awake long enough to read all of Kriya Shema, the whole thing, on the night of Leil Shimurim, on the first night of Pesach, and according to some poskim, even though it's Yom Tov Sheni Shel Galios, even on the second night, one should not say the whole Kriya Shema Lamita. They just say Shema and Hamapil, and that's it. So says the Gemara, that's because of Leil Shimurim, because it's Leil HaMashumar Ubami Sheshes Yimei Breishis. So that night is Bami Sheshes Yimei Breishis, but it's Leil Shimurim, and that's where the pasuk comes from, and therefore he says that it's going to be Nisan. And interesting about the language here is that if you're trying to prove Nisan, so then the drasha of Leil HaMashumar Ubami Sheshes Yimei Breishis is a little difficult, but Sheshes Yimei Breishis. So it's Lishitaso. When did he say Sheshes Yimei Breishis was? This is Rabbi Yoshua talking. It was in Nisan, which was Sheshis Yimei Breishis. So that matches perfectly. We can't get confused with the Shitas here because Rabbi Eliezer said the world was Nivra on the bottom of Daf Yudam and Beis was the one who said that the world was created in Tishrei. But this is Rabbi Yehoshua, the Shitasa, that Leil Shimurim speaks about Nisan. And the Sheshis Yimei Breishis were also in Nisan. Kafto Raferach, it works out perfectly. The Idach, how does each person understand their counterpart Shita? Laila. So Rabbi Eliezer would say back to Rabbi Yeshua, Laila hamashuma ruba mina mazikin. All that means is that night that there's no mazikin. If you look at the first Tosfos on the page underneath this unique footnote, and you look at the Tosfos there, Dibur Hamaschil, Laila hamashuma ruba mina mazikin. It means that we're protected from mazikin. Rabbi Yeshua tarte shamas mina. Rabbi Yeshua learns a couple of things from that. The kulu modu de mishumar mina mazikin. He agrees to that they're mishumar mina mazikin. Kedemuchach ba'arvei psachim, and this should ring a bell. To tikun dalid kosos v'lo chayesh azugos. We had learned about a concern about mazikin, about demons, that when things are in pairs, they cause for problems. However, we see that because Pesach is Leil Shimurim, even though the cups of wine are in pairs, but because it's Leil Shimurim, so therefore there's no concern about Zugos, about this demonic concern that, very interesting. This you're seeing a weave. This is just I'm just saying this on my own. What you're seeing is an interjection of the concerns of demons into the halachic process. It's not like external and just agarata. It's real. We had to factor it in because if Zugos is a problem, then what's with the four cups? We factored it in, and the concern about Shedim doesn't apply here because of a pasuk in Chumash of Leil Shimur. Very good. And they're reflecting the shitas of Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Eliezer, their shitas match their own thoughts in another area. And the area in which their shitas match have to do with the story of Noach and the Teva. What was the date of the Mabul? So it says the Gemara as follows: the Tanya, halfway down on Yud Aleph on the base. We're actually going to go pretty far. We're going to go halfway down on Yud Beis Yud Aleph, not because I'm trying to jump ahead, but because it's all one sugya, and that will just create for a little bit less work tomorrow, which isn't a bad thing because tomorrow is Thursday. The Tanya, the Brisa writes as follows: halfway down Yud Aleph on the base. Bishnas Sheish Me'os Shana L'Chayi Noach. Noach was 600 years old. B'chodesh Hasheni, in the second month. B'shiva Asar Yom L'Chodesh, on the 17th of the month. What was the date? Machlokes in the Tanoim. Rabbi Yoshua Omer Oso Hayom Yud Zayin Be'iyar. That makes sense because Nisan Iyar, as we learned in the beginning of this Masechta, we count years from Aleph Nisan. So if Nisan is month 1, then Iyar is month 2. Rabbi Yoshua has a very easy start to his Shita. Yom Shemazal Kima, that the constellation of Kima, which is a collection of stars, Shokea Bayom, it is at rest during the day. Ayanos Misma'atin, and Kima was responsible for the strength of water in the springs. And when it was at rest, when it was seemingly below the horizon, the springs would not bring forth a lot of water. and therefore there shouldn't have been a flood this day. But says the Gemara, because at that time people had deviant behavior, so therefore, and this is a very important idea, the Nefesh HaChaim speaks about this extensively, we have the power to shift things going on outside of our own Daled Amos, because we people down here on earth made a mistake. Therefore, Shina Kodesh Baruch Hu Alein Ma'aseh Bereshis. He changed. The constellations are supposed to be in perfect working order. The zodiac, the 12 zodiacal signs, they're supposed to be perfect. So here at this time of the year, it was supposed to be that the constellation of Kima was Nismait. It wasn't appearing. But because we messed up, so therefore, Shina Kadosh Baruch Hu Ma'aseh Bereshis, HaKadosh Baruch Hu had to change the way that the world worked. V'hela Mazal Kima Bayom, and he raised up the constellation of Kima, and therefore, V'natal Shnei Kochavim Mikima V'hevi Mabul Olam. So really, the constellation of Kima is the one that's responsible for the extensive flooding, and two of the stars from the constellation of Kima were what brought about the flood. And herein we see the Shita of Rabbi Yehoshua that really the flood started on Yud Zayin Iyar, as the pasuk says, in the second month. Now, Rabbi Eliezer, 2 lines from the bottom, is a little bit of a difficult Shita. The Gemara is going to call him out on it and try to explain it. Rabbi Eliezer, Omer, Oso Hayom, Yud Zayin b'Mar Cheshvan Haya. No, it was on the 17th of Mar Cheshvan. So that's difficult. Tishrei Cheshvan, right? It's the second to Tishrei. What?
It's this Sunday.
What is this Sunday? Oh gosh. Okay, that was a little morbid, but we'll go with it for now. Let's hope that it doesn't. I have no idea. All right. Let's hope there's no flood. We were promised already.
Those are saying Mashivura in the second month of Noah. They didn't say it. I think we should.
Wow. Okay. So says the Gemara that Rabbi Eliezer argues and said that the date of the flood was Yud Zayin Mar Cheshvan. Yom Shemazal Kima Ole Bayom. And really during this time of the year, the constellation of Kima, had we known what we were looking for, and some people might, I'm not one of them, people who really know astronomy, they could look up in the sky and say, yes, this is the mazel of Kima, and I can see it. It's supposed to be up there. And normally it is correct. Umayanos Miskabrin, there is more water, and that's seasonally true, at least, that there's more water, I guess. If there's major flooding, it's, I don't know. So it says the Gemara, it is supposed to be in the sky, but it's not supposed to be flood worthy quite yet. And as we turn to the top of Yud Beis Mud Aleph, shinu ma'asein, because people were misbehaving, so Shina Kodesh Baruch Hu Ma'aseh Bereshis, things changed. We're supposed to skip the next 4 words according to many of the Kisvei Yad. V'natal Shnei Kochavim, and the constellation of Kima, which was up in the sky, and it was not supposed to be a huge amount of water, but there was supposed to be a lot of water, just not mabul worthy. But because of the way that people were misbehaving, V'natal Shnei Kochavim v'hevi mabul olam. Okay, these are the 2 shitas of Rabbi Yehoshua, who says that the date of the flood was Yud Zayin Iyar, the second month as it relates to Nisan, and it would then be the second month, according to Rabbi Eliezer, it was Yud Zayin Mar Cheshvan, which is the second month as it relates to Tishrei, each of them saying exactly, let's remember what the Gemara said here at the beginning of this sugya, ve'azdu l'ta'amayhu, that each of them were counting from what they thought was the beginning of the world. Rabbi Yehoshua was counting from Nisan, and Rabbi Eliezer was counting from Tishrei l'shitasam. So then the Gemara throws a few questions. Bishlama the Rabbi Yehoshua, I understand the Shita Rabbi Yehoshua, Hainu d'chsiv sheni. The pasuk says in Chumash that it was the second month. That makes sense because we hold that Nisan is year 1 for the is month 1 for the count. Ela the Rabbi Eliezer, my sheni. No, that should be month 7. It should be month 8. It should not be this. Why would you say that? Why would you say that this month is? That's not right. It's not the second month of the year. Says the Gemara, you're right. It's not the second month of the year as it relates to the counting of the year. However, it is Sheni L'Din. It is the second month as it relates to Din. And what are we in fact talking about here? We're talking about Din. You guys all messed up. So this is a Din. So the frame of reference of the pasuk, you're right, and we've been counting months as it relates to how we normally count year. I agree with you, but here what we're saying is that it's as it relates to din, to the punishment, and you deserve the punishment. That was question and answer number 1. Question 2, 5, 6 lines down on Yud Beis Medal. Bishlam Rabbi Yehoshua Hainu Deshina. I understand according to Rabbi Yehoshua, who says that the date of the Mabul was Yud Zayin in the month of Iyar. At that time, the constellation of Kima was below the horizon, and therefore there should be no floodwaters. But Hainu Deshina, that's why when the people made a mistake, HaKadosh Baruch Hu had to change change the world. Ella says the Gemara, the Rabbi Eliezer, my Shina. According to Rabbi Eliezer, who says that the date of the Mabul was Yud Zayin Mar Cheshvan, so then Kima was already up in the sky. It was already supposed to be full springs of water. What was the Shina? What change did HaKadosh Baruch Hu make to reflect the poor behavior of the people on the ground? So says the Gemara, Kidder Rav Chizda. Rav Chizda teaches us the following principle. The generation of Noach beroschen kilkalu, they made their kilkul, they made their destruction beroschen, which is a reference to Shechvas Zera. It's a reference to Tashmish Amita that should not have happened. And if that was their kilkul, then if beroschen nidonu, then yes, you're right. You're right, according to Rabbi Eliezer, that Kima, the constellation of Kima, should bring about a lot of water, but it wouldn't be boiling hot water. But here, because they were kilkalu with Roschen, with Shechva Zera, therefore the water that came about during that time was boiling hot water. The Roschen kilkalu be'avera, over Roschen nidonu, and that's just the Gemara explaining the brisa. They did an aver, and that was their punishment. And how do we know that this is mashma? Because says the Gemara, Ksiv hacha vayashoku hamayim. Remember, at the end of the Mabul, we said vayashoku hamayim, a tough word to describe, but says the Gemara, Ksiv hasam, we have by Megillah Zester, b'chamas hamelech shechacha. Well, remember the story? Haman, he was so angry. They hanged him on a tree. What was the result? Finally, his anger came down. The boiling hot water, the temperature lowered. So that's how the Gemara brings a raya when Rabbi Eliezer says that really the date of the Mabul was in the month of Mar Cheshvan, and really the constellation of Kima would anyways be in the sky at that time, and there should anyways be large springs of water gushing forth. The Chiddush wasn't the water. The Chiddush was that the water was boiling hot to reflect Mida Keneged Mida, what they did wrong, which was Shechva Zer Levadal, Tashmish Amita, that should not have happened. Lastly, and we'll close with this, Tanu Rabban, on a third of the way down on Yud Beis Amud Aleph, the rabbis teach us in a brisa, Chachmei Yisrael, Monin Lemabul Ki Rabbi Eliezer. The Jews, the Chachamim, we count the date of the Mabul. We assume that it was Yud Zayin in fact, Mar Cheshvan, like Rabbi Eliezer, not like the Shita of Rabbi Yoshua, who said that it was in the month of Iyar. Ulat Kufa, when it comes to seasons, they follow ki Rabbi Yoshua in regards to the constellations. That's not a difficult comment to understand. And then says the Gemara, no, that's not. I'm looking at Rashi here. Rashi says almost halfway down, Dibur Maschel Tkufa ki Rabbi Yoshua, Kshemonin Tkufas Hachama v'Halavana Monin mi Nisan. That's the Yesod of Rabbi Yoshua, is that we start counting from Nisan. So that's what that is what that Nakuda means in the Gemara, that when we start counting from Nisan. But the Chachmei Umos Ha'olam, the non-Jews, the wise non-Jews, Monin Af L'Mabul K'Rebbe Yoshua. Their understanding is that the Mabul took place in the earlier date in the year, in the month of Iyar, like the sheet of Rabbi Yoshua. We'll stop right here. Tomorrow night, Thursday, Mir Hashem, we'll learn a blot and a half, and we will get to the bottom of Yud Gimel Amud Aleph. And I think that's about it for tonight. Wishing you all a beautiful night.